Hi, welcome to the March 23rd, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test on my end, make sure everything's going through okay. Hi, welcome to the... Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Gregundo. I am the host for the live stream today. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor for Steinberg products, and I'm will be the host, as I mentioned, and I'm presenting from outside of in the United States, from outside of Washington D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, what you could do is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or enter your comments in the live chat field. Later tonight, after the live stream, within a couple hours or a few hours, we'll try to have all of the topics that we cover in the live stream in an index that will be pinned to the top. So you could look, if you're watching this after the fact, you wanted to just kind of peruse through the different topics, you could do that and just click and it will take you immediately to that area in the timestamp. For those of us that are watching live, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, we're seeing some familiar people on the live stream. And if you're watching this not live, you may want to skip ahead to about like 5 or 6 minutes as we get people logged in. So just a couple little things to be aware of. If you have a question and ask it in the chat and you don't notice that I respond immediately, you may want to actually check to make sure, because the ability to ask the questions can far exceed my ability to answer them often. So we'll try to get through all the questions that we can chronologically. Occasionally my chat field may jump, so I'll apologize in advance if I lose any questions, but we'll try to get through all the questions that we can in chronological order. If you don't get a response to your question immediately and all of a sudden, it doesn't help, or it kind of slows everything down if you ask the same question over and over again. Also, when asking questions, it's sometimes helpful if you could, as you ask a question, if you could specify which version of Cubase, if you're on Mac or PC, and potentially your Mac your operating system that you're running. So you can say I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Windows 10 or Cubase 10.5 Elements on Big Sur, whatever. That information sometimes is helpful too. We have some people that always contribute and help out and assist me during the live streams. If you wanted to search for different topics that we've covered in Hangouts, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan has been kind enough to create a website where you could search and for particular topics that have been covered in the live streams, and then you could just go directly to that and search. We also have Agent K, who's kind enough to do some moderation for us. I think I restored his some reason his moderation status got turned off, but if you could let me know, Agent K, if everything is working as expected. We also have Jazz Dude, who is kind enough to help people out during the live streams. So as we do that, and he also runs, if you wanted to, I think he helps organize a fantastic resource of Cubase information for the Cubase Nation Discord. So if you want additional information and look for different resources and tutorials there, that is a great resource. So let's go ahead and do a quick scan of who is on the live stream. So we see Vinny Sabatino from Orlando. We have Agent K. I'm not sure where Agent K lives. Never says. We have Sir Robert Robinson from Atlanta. Great to see you. We have Ed Rugman from Northwest in the UK. We have Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, not far from our Yamaha office. Great to see you. We have Matt Elston from London. All right, so we have Ranfree from Arkansas. All right, so Derek from Toronto. All right, Millard Brown from Pennsylvania, from sunny Pennsylvania, he adds. All right. All right, so we have Filter Freaks made 4 weeks in a row. That's great. Okay. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden, Taylor Sapp. Okay, so we have, I thought I saw Uno from Finland. All right, so we have Ken from Norway. All right, we have Man from Jordan. I probably butchered that pronunciation, sorry. All right, so we have Italy checking in, Berkshire, UK. Stefan from Sweden. We have Jan from Sweden. John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Okay. I see that it seems like we got Agent K's moderation status restored, so glad to hear that. All right, so we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We have Ray from upstate New York. If you guys want to start asking questions, go ahead and we'll get started here in just a minute or two. All right, we have Chase Bethia from, I believe he's in Moore Park or in LA area. All right, so Michael Teams wants people to hit the like button now. All right, so we have Rob from Brantford in Canada. All right, so we have Kent from Washington. Okay, we'll let a couple more people get logged in and then we'll get started. All right, we have Razol from Denmark. Hope I pronounced that correctly. All right, Pablo's on the hangout from Galicia, España. Play some cool drum parts. Okay, we have someone checking in from UK, asking about synths. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, and we have Berlin Music Network also checking in. All right, so it's from Ed Rugman. Is there a way to replace multiple audio files stems with updated replacements in the pool? Currently replacing audio files manually in an audio folder and deleting image to force a waveform withdraw, waveform redraw. Okay, so I assume, Ed, that maybe when you're doing maybe something like a bounce export, let me just take a look. I'll just get this project open quickly. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to export, and I'll just do maybe a small region of this. So I will go ahead and open up my pool window. So in here we probably don't have too many audio files, but I'll just do a quick bounce of the project here, just a couple bars. I'll just say let's export audio mix down, and I'll do just a stereo mix out, and I'm going to add it. Let's see, and I'll just do a single file this time. So I will come here and we'll just choose a stereo out, and I'll just call this, sorry for hitting my microphone, say March 23rd mix. Okay, so in this, after export, I'm going to say just insert to pool. So I will come and we should see this file just go directly into our pool window. So we'll just do a quick export here. Okay, so now this is our file that we have here. So, if you have, depending on if you're working with this, you could, so say if I wanted to do that again, I'll just do an export audio mix down and I'll just start the Q export, and this will probably name it _01. Okay. So when I have like these two files, so I'm not sure if there are files that you're actually importing into the project, but let's say if I had this file from the pool, so let me just open up the pool again here. So let's say if I had this file, and I will add a quick audio track. Okay, so if I wanted this, so let's say this is my mixdown file. So one of the things that you could do within the pool window, and I'll just keep the pool window always on top. Is, if you, let's say if I wanted to replace this file with the new file, one of the things that you could do is if it's not in the project, that you could say, if we go to our pool window, I could remove unused media. And then what this could do is just simply move that particular file to the trash. And, you have this file, so it's no longer in the pool as you do that. So, one other method that you could do is if you have, audio files, like maybe if you have a sample file that's being used. Let's say just repeatedly here. And I will just kind of make copies of this part. So if you've used a part before, you could just drag over top another file. And if it's used multiple times, you could just hold down the shift key and you could replace that particular sound with, different sounds just by kind of dragging and dropping, so you don't need to update the waveform. But if the file isn't being used in the project, you should be able to just delete that, just right click and remove unused media. And then you shouldn't have a conflict with the other ones. But maybe if I'm misunderstanding, just kind of let me know, Ed. Okay. Let's read through some more questions here. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. Sometimes when doing tempo detection, the click shifts from downbeat to upbeat and back several times throughout the piece. Is there a way to correct this? So if you've done something with tempo detection, so let's say if I wanted to do a quick tempo detection on this, I will just come over here to my project menu, and let's just say I'll just hit the right function this time. So I'll just say let's do a quick tempo detection. Okay, so as we've done this, if you see this, when we do a tempo detection, if you notice that maybe something is a little bit off rhythmically, it kind of puts you directly into the time warp tool. So if something is like kind of jumps just a little too much and we have this activated, as soon as we make an adjustment here, let's say with our time warp tool, so I can say, okay, I'm just going to move this particular bar closer. It then does an analysis of the rest of the tempo. So it could kind of sometimes figure out that pattern, but make sure that as you make your quick little adjustment here, that you have this turned on, because you could have the analysis go from that point forward or from that point backward. So at that point, you could just, as you make one little tweak, that it'll do, the tempo analysis, the tempo detection analysis from that point on. So when you do that, just kind of, if you have like one beat, and I went through this with like somebody who's doing a disco remix, and there's one drum fill that did, every time it came up, and every time that it came up in the track, it would just kind of throw off the tempo detection. We just kind of did it once and had that activated, and then it would just do the reanalysis and was able to catch it the subsequent times. All right, so we see feature request from Taylor, be able to drag MIDI drum patterns into the beat designer. So I will pass that along. Sometimes when the beat designer itself, if you're not familiar with it, as a MIDI plugin. So just add, let's say, a MIDI track here. You go to the MIDI inserts. So the beat designer, it's kind of designed to, do the creation here and drag out. And it's limited to 8 sources, and you could have multiple beat designers, evidence, or you could have multiple beat designers within a particular project or track. But the intention was to really kind of do your beat here and drag and drop it into, into the project window. But you could also, if you have like, a particular pattern, you could. So if I have, let's say that's a drum pattern, and if I have even an instrument track of Groove Agent SE, I'm not sure if I could drag from, I know we could drag from the pattern pads to the project window, but you could also just drag a pattern here from the project window directly into Groove Agent SE as well, if you wanted to do it for performance purposes. So that may be a way to do it, but I'll pass along that feedback as well. All right, good to see Space Crawler on the Hangout. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so we see a question from, all right, so we have Omar from France who's in, and all right, so a question, hey guys, Lee here from the UK. I'm thinking of getting Cubase, but the interface to me looks confusing. How do you access your synths, etc.? So if you wanted to access all of your synths inside of Cubase, for your virtual instruments, you could just go right over here to the Media tab, and then you can see your VST instruments. All of your instruments can show up here. You can see graphic images. You can see it as a list. So if you wanted to come over here and, just add a Retrologue track, you could just drag it to the track list. And now you could have your Retrologue just play directly. And that's all you have to do. That track, you could have it automatically armed, and you could just start playing. So again, just come directly to your to the media rack, and you'll see a little home that'll take you home. You can go to your VST instrument. You could also click right click and add an instrument track and see all of your instruments there. Another method of doing this is clicking on the plus sign, add track, and you say add instrument track, which instrument, and then you could choose between your different instruments right here. So you can say, okay, I wanted to add, a, pad shop. So I could just come right there, add the pad shop track. The instrument will automatically get loaded. The track is added and selected, and you could just start playing. All right, so we have Athens checking in. All right, so we have Rob from Montreal. Okay, so we had a question. How do you align two MIDI files if one guy programmed the measures in 4/4 and the other dude made it 4/8 or something? All right, so... All right, so, generally we have one kind of common time signature, but if we had different MIDI tracks, so I'll just go ahead and add in some voices here. All right, let's... use one of Dom's patches from Apollo. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just enter in I'll just do a quick step entry, and we'll just say half notes here. Okay, so if we go to look at these particular notes, okay, so let's say if we have these notes, and I'll just do a quick lengths for them. I'll just erase the last one. So say we have a whole bunch of half notes. So if you wanted this to kind of, double in time, or, half in time, if you needed to make that match for different meters, you could go to your project, you go to the logical editor under MIDI, and I think there's some presets for this already. So if you wanted to double tempo or half tempo, so say, okay, let's just double the tempo and hit apply. And now all those notes would just be kind of half of the length. So let me just show you here. So just look at, so this is what it was like before. And if I wanted to do, to make it half length, let me just... or double length. So this is just one of the logical editor presets. So if you needed to, give it, or the, switch between the eighth note is the pulse or the half note is the pulse, you could use some of the logical editor presets to, double the tempo or half the tempo. So just under standard set, you'll see double tempo, half tempo. So now if I wanted to just do half tempo, we would just kind of change the pulse of the notes so it could work in different meters. right, so you see a question. Hello, Greg. I have a question. Is there a way in Cubase, in the MIDI editor, that you could make a long note and play the rhythm? I would like to make it with a staccato violin with two voices sound. Okay, so let's take a look. And I don't think there's a way of doing that I know of, but we'll take a look. Give it a shot. So just seeing if we could do. So we could kind of change like the rhythm, the velocity without the pitch, or yes, I don't know a way to do that. Kind of where the one note and then you would kind of play back a different rhythm. So, but you might be able to, let's say if we have. So, but you might be able to just record. So let's say if I record in the editor, like just a different note. But, it is, so let's say to apply kind of the rhythm. You could select, so let's say if I just played a series of notes here. So let's say if I wanted this to be on C or E3, I could take all of these notes and let's say if I see if I hold down, I'll just do this on F3. And I'm just going to hold down the shift. Let me see if I can get all these notes to be fixed. Okay, so if I just played in a different note, so let's say if I just played in, I had one long note, right? And this may not do kind of exactly what you want, but if you just kind of played in any notes rhythm, so let's say, okay, I hit record. And this may get you to the same spot, but if I just wanted to take these notes, I could go to the pitch here and I'm going to say, okay, let's put these to F3 and then hold down Command or Control. So now that we do that, they're all kind of on the same exact pitch. So, if you just played a different note, then you could just assign it to the rhythm of one fixed pitch. And again, just kind of select all the notes and Command or Control, select the value before from the info line, and that will fix that particular pitch. So that may get you to the same way, but just maybe a different approach. All right, so we see Michael Teams giving kudos to Jan for the Cubase Index site, and great to see Robbie Bowling on the Hangouts from Dallas. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Can we ask questions here, or are they prepared in advance? So just ask your questions right in the chat field. So, and we'll be able to, you can send them in advance if you want by going to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just submit them into the chat field, and we'll get to them. We're pretty early in Hangout, so just ask your questions in the live chat field. Okay, so we have a question. I'm trying to understand how to set up my mixer console to show VST input level versus post fader level. So if we come here, let's say if I have a track, okay, so if you wanted to look at the levels here, all you have to do is right click on the fader. So let's say if we're playing this particular drum loop, make sure I don't kill everyone volume wise. So let's say if we do this. So at this point, if I have like, let's say really heavy compression on it, I'll just come here and let's kind of squash, and we'll do it on the right channel this time. That would help. Okay. So now we see that we're changing the dynamic level, but if I wanted to see the input level, we could right click on the particular fader here and just kind of scroll down, and you'll see global meter settings. So you can say the meter position, I want to see the input meter. And let's say if I want to switch it to post fader, so we can see that right now it's pretty high. So this is before the compression. And now if I wanted to right click and make it post fader, you just see global meter settings, right click there, and you can say post fader. And now we'll see this level drop because we're attenuating the signal because of the compressor. So we'll see that level reflected there. So just right click, global meter settings, and now we can say input meter. You see that go up. And as I adjust, if I adjust my compression here, we don't see any changes because it's the input that's going into the fader, that's going into the channel rather. And once again, right click, just in the meter area, and say, okay, I just wanted this to be post fader now. It gets significantly reduced because of the compression. So. Okay. Okay, so a question. I'm rather confused about the mixed dry setting on the compressor, not considering parallel compression. Most compressors, like the tube and vintage compressors, are set to wet. So the intention is to kind of give you the balance between to create a parallel type of compression without necessarily having a parallel compression like setup. So if I come here and take this drum loop and I'll just put it on the vintage compressor under dynamics. So this is kind of an easy, way to, without having to do any complex routing, So when I come to the vintage compressor, let's just come over here, let's say. And now when we adjust our mix, this way I could choose not to have it compressed. And let's go ahead and just say I want to squash this really good. So let's say that's going to be squashed really good. But if I wanted to kind of find a balance to kind of within one single plugin to kind of have some of the attack of the original with some of the control of the wet, that's what we can do with this particular plugin to kind of to give you this, you know, the best of both worlds so that you don't have to do complex routing. So if you want it like heavy compression, but maybe just kind of to blend it into the signal, you can kind of find a sweet spot. Or if you want it to be totally so that's kind of the intention of some of those, that you could find that sweet spot between kind of the dynamics and having control of it. And that's the intention of the mix that you see on some of the particular dynamics plugins. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg, and thank you for these live streams. I have a question. Is there a way of saving crossfade presets to use later? Okay, so let's say if I have crossfade set up here, if you double click, you could enter the crossfade editor. So let's say, okay, I want to have, you know, this, and I want it to have unequal gain for these, and I really liked this particular crossfade. So let's say I want this as my crossfade. So all you have to do is come to the presets here and save preset. So I will just kind of come over here and we'll call it Georgie. And so now I could always just come over here. I could make that a default, or I could just simply come right over here and that will be my crossfade preset. Or if I wanted, you know, other presets, we could just simply, I could just come over here and we could apply that in other projects as well. So once you just have the crossfade editor open, you know, you could, you know, just hit the X key. So again, I'll just come here. Let's just do a quick crossfade. And now I could just double click and you could just call it up as you want it to. So that's all you have to do. So I see from John, I guess the native instruments USB keyboard complete control M32 should be able to control Cubase 11's transport A. So yeah, you may have to, a lot of times the transport, and it could vary depending on a company, but sometimes transport controls may by default be, you might have to add a Mackie control. I don't have any of the native instruments controllers. But if you just go to, you know, it may be where you have to set up the transport under a Mackie control and set that up. There may be a little, sometimes, you know, controllers can have like their own little scripts that could go, that could be loaded in here, but you should be able to control any of the functions. And if it's not kind of working as expected, if you just go to your studio setup, you could say, you know, configure generic remote. You could say, when I hit this button, click on the learn button, hit the button and say, okay, I want to go to transport, device and I want this to, start. And that will just kind of start and stop, start to playback. So you could configure it through generic remote, but I'm sure there's probably documentation on how to get that going. But yeah, you shouldn't have any problems having that work to control the transport. All right, great to see Walter Blackledge from St. Louis Club Cubase. All right. Okay, so a question from DB Music Productions. I would like to change the color of multiple tracks together. Am I missing a way? Is this a possibility through a potential update, or is it impossible? All right, so let's just do quickly a new project, and we'll show you how to do this. Okay, so I'll just come here. Let's add a number of tracks. Okay, so I'm going to select the tracks, switch over to the color tool that we see here. So the color tool, and then just pick your color. And then that's all you have to do. Then all of your tracks will be colorized. And I'll get this question next. How do I get all those colors? So if I hit, I think it's Alt-Shift-S, here we could see different color presets. So I think by default, you may have it kind of 16 colors. But all you have to do is just select all of the tracks that you want, make sure the color tool is selected, and choose the active color that you want. Okay, sorry, my chat field just kind of jumped on me. Okay, so I see from Suran68 Soren, Greg, in MIDI editing and piano roll with the draw tool selected, word delete note a mouse click. I saw that you do it a lot in MIDI editing. Cannot find it again. Can you show again? Length, pitch, placement. Okay, so let's say if I have a quick MIDI track or instrument track. Okay, so in Cubase 11, let's say if I just drew in, so I have some notes here. And with Cubase 11, there's a little change where you see this little edit. And because a lot of people in 10.5 and earlier, when we just double click, not necessarily with the draw tool, but with the object selection tool, in 10.5 and previous versions, you could double click on a note and that would open up the expression editor. And a lot of people would be confused, like, I don't know what that is or what that screen is. So we made it to the point where you could just, and I think this is the default state. So now you could just double click with the object selection tool on a note to delete it. And there's keyboard shortcuts where you could, if you want it, if you're doing a part that had a lot of note expression editing, you could do that, or just turn it off or bypass it. And it's just this little E. So it's not necessarily the drawing tool that does it, but you could just double click with the object selection tool. And that will, if this is disabled, that will just delete the note. So you don't have to switch to an eraser tool to just delete the note or hit the delete key on your computer keyboard. You could just double click and the note will just be gone. So just see, hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Just wondering, is it safe if I leave the USB dongle always plugged in at all times? I want to have my studio interface and MIDI keyboard on my 2 only USB ports. So yeah, I've left my USB e-licenser plugged into my studio computer. It's, you know, the same one I've had plugged in for 20 years and haven't had any problems. So you could leave it always connected without worries. You see Michael Teams, he's had 7 years with no problems. All right. Yeah, and also from John, it says, I want to plug it in at the back so I can use the front USB ports for other devices. So yeah, definitely you could plug it into any device, and it takes such minimal power that you could also plug it into unpowered hubs as well. When I used to travel all the time and do presentations, I just had like a $7 USB unpowered USB hub that I got from Best Buy, and I would run, you know, my audio interface, like an iLock, a USB e-licenser, and my mouse receiver, all on the USB port, all on the unpowered USB hub. So. All right, so you see question from Indonesia: how using Cubase to mixing guitar? I think it's maybe distortion. So, you know, if you wanted to do, you know, there's great plugins for amp modeling that comes with Cubase. So I'll show you kind of an example if you're. Okay. So let's say if I wanted to go to these particular, this project here. So all the rhythm guitars that you hear in this are all coming from the VST amp rack. I know you're looking good. I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. So that's like what the guitar parts sound like. And now with the plugin enabled, and we can listen to that in context. That's the amps bypass. And with this, you have kind of a whole different variety of amplifiers, cabinets, effects, microphones, and mic positions. You could have pre-effects, different configurations. Actually, my friend had gave me this this demo track. He was, you know, when I used it at a presentation he was at, he was like, man, why do your guitars sound so much better? I was like, you know, because I was like, you're smart enough to record the guitars just direct, and I replaced all the amps using the software amps. And he's like, oh, it sounds so much better than the guitar amps the guys had. So you could definitely use Cubase for doing distortion. So. See that Pablo has forgotten his questions for today. He's not prepared for class. All right, we'll have to tell the principal and tell his parents he's not prepared for class today. All right. All right, great to see Jazz Dude on the Hangout. He's probably been on for a while. I'm catching up. All right, great to see David and Kristen from Nashville. Missing you guys. Okay, so just see, hey Greg, I've noticed my audio connection sometimes reset to null values in my template, and I have to remap each input and output bus in the audio connections tab. Any way around this? So when I've seen something like that happen is if the project was started maybe with a different audio interface. and it's trying to remap settings, like maybe the interface wasn't connected when Cubase started, or it's not the active audio interface. So I would try to go over here to just, make sure that if you go to the studio setup, that you have the correct audio interface selected. And it can never hurt to actually go to your audio connections, and when you have your inputs and outputs tab, to just save these as presets. And then when you open up before opening up the project, make sure that, this is a valid audio interface that's selected. And then I don't think you should have any problems. I have seen situations like that where people may have something mapped out for, 16 inputs and 16 outputs going to and from a console, and then it gets turned into their built-in audio interface because the audio interface was powered off, and then it's remapping all the ports. So, but make sure that you have everything kind of enabled in the correct audio interface and the correct presets loaded, and you should be able to just have that work for you as expected. Okay, so we see from James Grieve, I'm currently trying to decide if I want to purchase Nuendo and also a new PC for working with audio and video files. So yeah, it's Nuendo is a wonderful choice. If you're going to be doing stuff like, for Dolby Atmos, if you're doing a lot of, there's phenomenal tools for reconforming or doing dialogue replacement. But all those, different aspects of Nuendo, Cubase will handle just about any music production task. But when you get into more, creative sound design, Dolby Atmos mixing, dialogue replacement, those types of things that Nuendo really kind of excels at, with all in addition to all the Cubase features. Okay, and we see from Ed Rugman, hi Greg, yes, I'm replacing stems that have come from external DAW and are in a project window, sometimes split up, but want to replace the entire audio file with a new updated version that's been sent to me subsequently. So I think if you would just, take, let's... And I think so. Let's say if I have just I'll just replace just with a loop again. So I'll take just a small little section of audio and. So I think even if we just drag, a file, right on top, that you could just, take your different stems. But if it's kind of different channel configurations, you might have to kind of, drag it to a particular location. I could play around with it a little bit, Ed, after the live stream if you want, but I think you should be able just kind of to just drag and drop. And you may also want to consider maybe, just doing new versions of your particular, project. So let's say, this is, the original file, and you get new updated files that you would just come here to say new track version. And then you would just kind of drag over a particular file for your new track version, and then you could kind of bounce back and forth as needed. And I know I picked two files that are completely different lengths, but maybe working with track versions might help you as well. And then you could always get rid of the unused files. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, hi Greg, question. Can you make a MIDI logical editor to reduce the volume of every third note by set amount? Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll just switch this to quickly to maybe like a drum editor. Okay, so I want every third note, let's say, to go down by 30 or something like that. So let's go to the MIDI logical editor, and let's see if I may have even set this up to... Okay, so what I want to do is we'll just build it from scratch. So we'll choose our function to transform. And we're going to say type is equal to note. And we'll go to last event. We'll choose equal and we'll say event counter. And let's say I want this to be 3. And so what we're going to do is select, and I'll just test this real quick. All right, let me just... Just looking at a previous preset I did. Okay, so type is equal to note. We'll say last event is equal to event counter 3. And for this, I want to take value 2 and subtract 30. Let's see if I remember if this is how we could do it. All right, let me just see if it's... All right, so let's say if I just select... Let's see if I had saved this. All right, so what you want to do is say type is equal to note. We'll say last event, the event counter. So I'll just go ahead and let me fix this, all of these. So type is equal, okay, so type is equal to note. In the second field of the action target, you want to say last event, and you'll say every other event, event counter, and here I could do 2 or 3. So do like every other note. So let's say if I undo that, and I'll just set this to 3. So now if I do this correctly, every third note will then go to value 2 of a MIDI note, which is the velocity, the down velocity, and that will subtract 30. So once again, type is equal to note, last event, every other event, the event counter, set it to 3, so every third note. And what we want to do to every third note, we define any action target, and we say value 2, subtract 30. So that's how you could accomplish that. All right, so getting back to Ed's comment about the, replace the events. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to replace this. So yeah, just shift and drag over top, and that will just replace the particular event with a new one. If it's being used multiple times, you will get prompted if you want to replace all of them. All right, so we have a question from James, and he'd emailed this in, but to improve functionality and efficiency, will DSP accelerators or other hardware can help? What is the workflow chart for the DAW plugins, other software and hardware? What are the bottlenecks and solutions? So there are, there used to be more DSP accelerators because it was a bit more relevant when the computers were slower. So when Cubase first started doing digital audio, I would say that we would put smart cards into dumb computers that didn't have a lot of number crunching capability to handle all of the processing. But really, it's kind of almost switched where we're putting dumb cards into smart computers. So probably the most common DSP accelerator that will be available is the UAD cards or the UAD systems, and they work well, and I believe that their plugins, from what they've told me years ago, was that they're all written as native VST plugins and then ported over to their hardware. Now, the hardware could run the processing power. It still takes some processing power to run that, even though it's being assisted by DSP. But a lot of times, for a lot of systems, it's almost as if they're more of a copy protection mechanism, you could say, because the computers that we have now can, run a tremendous amount of plugins. So if you want it to have, some people, will get UAD systems because it does, run a number of plugins without taxing your computer. But at the same time, it could be that, it doesn't really need to tax your computer. And with the UAD, they just show up like normal audio plugins. There's no real different, we have to do some really obscure routing information. It's just in the eyes of the computer, the host is a VST2 plugin. So now sometimes with the third party, with DSP accelerators, there's been a lot of them in the past and a lot of them don't work anymore. So, depending on, different market trends, it's like some people, I have a SSL DSP accelerator that runs on FireWire that will never run on a 64-bit system. So it's just kind of sitting in my closet. So I have two, TC Electronics cards that, don't have any, that don't have a life hood anymore. So So I think because the computers themselves do a tremendous amount, I would try to do everything natively first. And if you wanted to have a different flavor for the plugins, then a UAD system is great for that. I don't think it's necessary as it used to be to run high quality plugins that, the coding has gotten very efficient and the CPUs have gotten tremendously faster. So I would, if you're starting off, I would, probably just try to do everything natively. And I think that's where the market momentum is going. Because Intel and Apple and AMD are spending tremendous amount of resources always making the CPUs faster for people that do power usage of their processors like Steinberg users. So all right, great to see ProWash DFW on Hangout. All right. Sub 403 wants everyone to hit the like button. I see James is just saying apologies for the grammar. He had to cut, copy, and paste for his 200 character limit. No problem. So I think James lives in Manassas, Virginia, not far from me. I grew up in Dale City and lived in Lake Ridge for a number of years. All right, great to see Ace Amadeus on the Hangout from Texas. Okay, question from Taylor Sapp. Is there a way to change the time signature from 4/4 to 2/4 and have the metronome click at half tempo without changing the tempo of the audio or MIDI track? All right, so if we wanted to put in, different tempo changes, so I'll just add, let's say, a signature track at the top. All right, and I'll just put in some different time signatures here. So let's say, okay, so we'll go 4/4, let's say 3/4. And let's say 4/4, 2/4. And we'll give that 2 measures and then 4/4. All right, so if I wanted to, so we look at this, our signature track, and we'll activate the metronome. All right, so we could hear that. But let's say if I wanted like the 2/4 to be in halftime, I could just, if we just click here on the actual event, we'll see in the info line a click pattern. So now I could just double click here and I can say, okay, I want that to be default. And then 3/4, I want it to be more defined. So I'll come here to this click pattern and say, I want it to change the pitch. And then when I go to 4/4 here, I can go to my click pattern and say, let's just double tempo. So we'll have like almost eighth notes. And then we go to 2/4. I could select this and then I could just say, I just want it to be halftime. So if you just put an X and then we go back to normal 4/4. So you can set kind of the metronome pattern however you want. Just kind of click here. And you could also, if you have it arranged on the main transport, but if you just click here, you could, and then you could double click and just change the patterns as you want. So it could be that you want 4/4 to be normal here. You want it to be, let's say, and let's say for this one, you want it to be more of a quintuplet feel. You could say, okay, I just want to make this 5, and then I wanted this to be halftime. So we could say, okay, our 4/4, 3 different pitches, double time, halftime, normal, quintuplets, halftime, back to normal 4/4. So as soon as you just select from the signature track the different events, and then you could actually see the patterns indicated here on the inspector as well. So, and then you could copy those if that's what your verse is or your chorus or a bridge and you need to use that again. Just, if you have all those patterns set up and you don't feel like recreating it all again, just come here, hold down your Alt or Option key. And if you do it correctly, you could just copy those particular aspects. So, okay. Okay, so we see David Young is back, even though he's moved to Studio One and is loving it. So we're glad to have you on Hangout. So, and if you had bad customer service with Steinberg, that's why we do these Hangouts, so you can get your help in real time. So if you have questions, just let me know. But we're glad to see you here. Okay, so just see from Redford Music. Hi, Greg, just stopping by to try to ask in the near future, will there be better tools to integrate hardware synths into Cubase? I have a Korg Minilog XD, and it's impossible to integrate into Cubase. So I have, 23 tone modules, so I could, so I'm not sure what you're having problems integrating with Cubase, but Cubase works with external modules, so I'm not sure if you're using it as your audio interface or just MIDI, but you could definitely come over here, connect to your Chord. If you have a USB interface, just add a MIDI track, and then you could tell it to come from send your MIDI information directly out. If you don't have a mixer, you can go to your studio menu to audio connections and connect. If you have available inputs and outputs, you could just simply connect the outputs, the audio outputs of your Korg, and come over here and add an external instrument and define which inputs it's connected to. But we have millions of users using external gear, external instruments. So if you could maybe Redford Music, you let us know how your Korg Minilog isn't integrating. That would be helpful. But it works very well, and I have a huge rack of gear. So. Question, Greg, can you explain why so many users use reverb as an insert instead of an effects track? Please show us how easy it is and advantages to instead use effects track for various effects. Thanks, Jan. So, I think a lot of people tend, I don't think that there's a good reason why people tend to use an insert as to use a reverb as an insert on tracks. So I think it's maybe coming from other programs or just how they think that they just load every plugin as an insert as opposed to like an effect. So let's say if I wanted to go to project, let's do a little classical one here. It's a project I did years ago. All right, so I will go ahead and we'll just say, so if I wanted these all to sound like they were in the same performance hall. So a lot of times when I hear people's projects, I often hear it's like, 12 different reverbs, and then they try to add a 13th one to make it sound like it's all together. And the problem is that they have like 12 different ambient spaces within the same mix. So if I wanted to take these particular tracks, so say this is just going to be dry. There's a little hall in this, but I would just come over here. I always find it advantageous for like reverbs and delays that are going to be shared across multiple tracks to use an effect send. So a lot of people just come over here to inserts, and it takes really, the same amount of time to add a send as opposed to an insert. But I'll take all these tracks and I'm going to right click and we'll say add effects channel to selected channels. So I'm going to say, let's go for like a revolution or reverence reverb. And let's say I want it to be more of like a little bit, like a small concert hall. So let's say, so we'll go through some of the presets here. So all sorts of different presets that you can work with. But let's say I'll do a warm wooden church. Okay, so now when I play this back, I could go to my sends and I could send different amounts. So let's say I'll just take off the reverb on most of these. So let's say I'll just take the piano here. Then as I bring in the reverb, these are all kind of going into the same room. And you kind of get that cohesion that people often work so hard to do away with by using plugins as inserts. So this way I'm using one reverence, but all of my tracks are feeding it. So let's say I'll just mute the reverence. So I think a lot of people just kind of use reverbs as inserts. I could see maybe like, okay, for a particular effect on something, but I see a lot of people using 12 of the same reverbs as inserts across multiple tracks, and that just eats up your CPU. So that's why I always use sends myself. So there's no real advantage I see of doing that. So. All right, so we have Michael from Damascus in Syria. Welcome to the Hangout. I see Millard Brown is saying that the U.S. customer service is very good. I'll let our team know. Thanks. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see question, any updates on M1 compatibility? So I think it was announced that we'll see kind of pretty extensive Rosetta support for M1 with the next maintenance release. So just kind of, keep your eyes open for that in the next couple weeks, I think. So. Okay, so a question from Tim. In the lower window, when adjusting note pitch, select the notes you want to change and just hit the up or down arrows and enter. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's a question or maybe Tim is helping someone else, but I'll just show it quickly here. So if you want to, let's say just if you have these notes, we could have these notes selected and you could just go up and use the up and down arrows. Or if you want to go octaves, hold down shift and that will go up or down by an octave, just like that. Or just want to take one note, you could just select it and just move it up and down with the arrow keys. Okay, so we see from Dallas LaRue, when I set the regular compressor in Cubase to 100% wet, it doesn't work. When it is on dry, the levels are even. But when I set it to 100% wet, the level goes through the roof. All right, so let's go ahead and take a listen. Let's just load up the normal compressor. We'll just go back to our drum loop here and just load up the compressor. Just revert this. All right, so I'll just take this particular drum. Okay, so let's say even if I go to like the channel strip, which will be kind of the same plugin. All right, so let's say if I just come here. All right, so I think that's the original value there, and then so it may come off as kind of being inverted, but let's say if I just have that set there, so that's kind of not compressed, but you just could go directly to the middle part there, but that seems to kind of work as I expect. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so, and it could also be, you know, if you have your auto makeup gain might make, you know, but so see if you have the, you know, Dallas, if you have the gain, but I mean, that seems to be kind of compressing as expected, but it could be the auto makeup gain could be causing, but that's kind of not compressed, and now we can blend the two. Just like that. Okay. Okay, so a question, is there a way to adjust the chord track according to my melody? For example, I make some kind of Egyptian music and I want the chords will fit to it. So, you know, the chord track it's kind of, the intention is kind of the opposite, where you can make a melody and have it follow the chords that you've defined. But it's hard to figure out like what the chords are from a single note. I mean, it could make educated guesses, but you know, if you have a melody, and let's say you choose to do simple chords, that could be 3 different chords with different voicings, or if you get into different modes. So it's a bit impractical to, have a chord determined from a melody in kind of a practical way, and then, okay, what if you're dealing with more complex, 5-note, 4-note, 6-note chords? So it could be very tricky to actually do. So it's not really designed for that. It's designed where, you could have the melody follow the defined chords that you've done, but not determine the chords from a melody, because there's just not enough information to practically work with. It's like maybe, if you're making an analogy, and you only had 2 colors, and it's like trying to paint Picasso from a black and white painting, but that probably isn't a good analogy, but you just don't really, if you took a picture of Picasso with 1 color, and then try to figure out all the colors and try to interpret that. So. Okay, so hi Greg, can you please show how to bust out a Groove Agent drum kit and route actuals like kick, snare, hi-hats, toms to different individual effects applied to them? Thanks. Okay, so let's come right over here. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. And if you haven't hit the like button, make sure you do that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well, and you get notified of future Hangouts. I think next Tuesday, just a quick announcement, next Tuesday will be our last Hangout of the month. So we'll spend the last 2 hours. We'll do kind of an abbreviated Hangout next Tuesday. And we will do kind of our Zoom meetup. So I'll probably have the Zoom meetup details if you want to email me. I'll get the Zoom session set up, and we could all hang out and meet, and I don't have to be the only one talking, so I like that part. All right, so let's say if I have a pattern playing here, and I wanted to bust out my different sources for effects. Now, you may not have to do it, because you could do a lot of this internally within Groove Agent. So if we have our acoustic agent here, by default, it'll be broken down where I can have my snare, my overheads, my room mics, my hi-hat and toms and cymbals, all kind of broken down. We could go to your aux and just add a reverb. So if I wanted to add more snare to that, I could just, add more effects, or if I wanted to apply EQ, and if you wanted to do compression, so if I want to take just a snare track here and apply compression on it, or we could do tape saturation. So if I want to take the kick and make it sound like it was running through more analog goodness, I could just come over here and just add more drive to drop a little bit of and you could even have like an envelope shaper. So if I wanted to take the kick and have more attack or more length, or if I wanted to be like really tight but short, or have more release for like more body in a kick. So for every source, you're going to have, multiple, you're going to have an envelope shaper, tape saturation, compression, EQ, inserts, as well as accents. Now, if you still needed to break this out, one of the cool things that you could do is just kind of come over here. And if we've set this up, let's say I go to my mix console, is you could right click and just choose to export mixer and effects to Cubase. And this will now take all the settings and it's applied it directly into my Cubase mixer. So you could do that. But if you wanted to just use like, third-party plugins, we could do this quite easily. Just by activating different outputs. So let's say if I'm playing this, I could come to the top and I could say, okay, I want my kick to come out of that channel, and I could activate my snare to go out of output 2, my hi-hat out of output 3, and let's say my room out of output 5, and my overheads out of output 4. And now I could run these through the same EQs that I was doing on all of the other channels as well. So I could come right over here and just be able to do my processing, as we just wanted to do all of the different processing as we just kind of click here. So if I wanted to just EQ my snare, so within Groove Agent, really all you have to do, from directly within Groove Agent, just go to the mixer, and then you could just send it to different outputs if you need to. But you could do a lot of processing internally. You could take those internal processes and migrate it to the Cubase mixer, or just use all third-party plugins if you wanted to as well. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Let's just scroll back, say I have lots of questions in my future. Thank you for all of the wonderful questions so far. Okay, just trying to find my spot where I was so I don't miss any questions. Okay. All right, so a question is, Elements Edition, can you set up players in the Chord editor? So let's take a look and see if we can. I think I may just have Elements 10.5, but I don't think that would change. So it looks like you could have patterns that are dragged and dropped. That looks like you have kind of a default piano, but you could drag and drop patterns in. So you could have that if you wanted to. So yeah, it looks like you could have kind of a default guitar pattern or a piano pattern right there. So it looks like you can. So close out of this. Okay. All right, great to see Captenergy music on. Hope life in Harrisburg is well for you. Hey, Greg, is it possible to draw in MIDI notes in a block? Example, insert 16th notes for a whole bar. So let me just see if we could do that. Okay. So what you could do if you wanted to cut, if you wanted to do something like that, like in a drum editor, it's really easy. You could just choose your rhythmic value here. So I could say 16th notes, and now I could just drag and drop, just like I could just draw across with the drumstick tool. But when we enter notes in the key editor, I don't think it's going to work the same way. So if I come here, it's just going to enter in one long note, but so I'm seeing if I hold down a modifier key, if that makes a difference. But what you can do if you need to do it in the key editor, and this is the old film composer trick. I remember joking with Hans Zimmer about this once. So you just come here, and if you hold down the scissors tool and then hold down Alt or Option, you can now just split like one note into a series of 16th notes. So now you're taking what was one long note, and this will cut at the same rhythmic interval. So if you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can now just turn that into a series of 16th or 32nd or 8th note triplets, whatever you kind of cut the first cut at. So. Okay. All right, so we see from DB Music Productions, thank you for the color changing answer. Can't believe I didn't know that. Well, it's those types of things that keep me employed. So, and that's why we do these hangouts, so you're getting, or the live stream, so that you're getting the most out of your Cubase that you have. Okay, so I see my MIDI is mute, no output in Cubase 10.5 Pro, but working in Cubase Elements 11. So one thing to check when I often get this, it could matter if you're like, as you're playing, if you're actually, if you're playing here and it doesn't, and you don't hear it like in real time, that could be one thing. But if you hear it if you have notes entered and it's not playing back. So, one preference to check is if you go over here to preferences and just make sure that when you go to MIDI, that you have MIDI through active. So if that is turned off, now I'm playing this instrument and it's record enabled, I don't hear anything because the MIDI through is turned off. So make sure that the MIDI through is turned on. So, and you could also, if you go to the MIDI inserts, you could have a MIDI monitor. So as I come here, I could see the MIDI notes, but if you see the MIDI notes coming in as indicated by the transport here, and you see it, what you want to do is just try that particular preference again and see, and always, just check to see what your MIDI input is set for, if it's at the all MIDI inputs into the right channel, but give those suggestions a try. All right, so you see, hi, is it possible to apply fade out on a MIDI track? Well, MIDI tracks themselves don't have a part, but if you go, so there's no actual audio event to fade, but if you go to, let's say, here's a virtual instrument part, and if I click in the lower left-hand corner here, I could just see the volume automation. And then if you want to just kind of draw a tool, you could just kind of draw in a fade out just like that if you wanted to, or within the event itself, you could do a MIDI CC message for main volume. And then if you wanted to just kind of draw out in the main volume of the event there, you could do it kind of those two different ways. So, but it's not necessarily like a fade handle because it's, a MIDI track. It's different than an audio, but you could draw in automation. We could also just go to your fader here and, automate, just kind of, record that as automation. So there's several different ways to do that for doing a fade for a MIDI part. So we have a question, is there an option to use Cubase Pro with a monthly subscription approach? If not, what is the view in this group to have this as an option? So currently it's not set up that way. We've had a lot of people have very kind of strong feelings that they don't want that. Some people would like it as an option. So, but, we're, as Steinberg has announced recently, they're going to be redoing the licensing system. And, they have announced that it will be kind of the same model and not going to a subscription. And it seems a lot of people don't want to go to a subscription model, but we could let the comments speak for themselves. Okay. You see, according to Pablo, that Michael Teams is famous. That's good to know. Okay, so we see from James Kennedy, is there a quick option to record a MIDI instrument output as audio? So there's a couple of different ways. One is, let's say if I've recorded something here, if I want to turn it into audio or just record it as audio. So there's two different things. So if I come here, let's say, and let me just check my preference again. Okay. I'll just revert this quickly because I have a bunch of automation I've written in. Okay, so if I have a particular track here, okay, so I recorded just some MIDI information. One of the things you could do is just come right over here and just do a quick render in place. And you could go to your render settings and just say, okay, I want this channel settings. You could have it muted. And then it's turned into audio just like that. If you wanted to, totally get rid of the MIDI data, you could come and just choose. So let's say if I go to my edit and I have not the event selected, but the channel selected here on the left, I could do a render in place and I could just choose to remove the source tracks and say render. And now what it's going to do is just kind of take that and render that particular track to an audio file. But if I wanted to record, let's say, both MIDI and audio simultaneously, I could take this track and I'm going to route it to a group channel. and we'll make it a stereo group. And I wanted to add an audio track. And let's say this group, I wanted the group to be the input. So now when I play, my virtual instrument is now being routed to this group. And this audio track has the input from that group. So if I wanted to now just hit record, I could record audio and MIDI. And the audio and MIDI have been recorded simultaneously. So if I wanted to just now. So that way you can record the MIDI and audio, quickly with, 3 mouse clicks. All right. All right, so we have a question. Is there a shortcut for when you select a MIDI note, then you engage a shortcut that selects all the MIDI notes from that note to the end of the MIDI event? Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can find it. Okay, so let's say if I want to select this note. So Shift will select all the same pitches after. So shifts all the same pitches of the same note. Let me see if there's a quick shortcut, but I think you could, if you could just go to select, let's say from cursor to end. So you could just set the keyboard shortcut for that. So at this point, if I'm here, I could say select from cursor to end, or cursor to beginning, cursor to end. So just go to edit menu and select, let's say from cursor to the end. And you could set it up like that, and you can set up a keyboard shortcut to trigger that. All right. Okay, so we have a question. If I wanted to make a collection of patches for the Halion Sonic or Retrologue, what is the best way to do this? It'd be great to save all the patches as one file. So they're going to be individual files for kind of user created patches. There may be a way you know, I think if you reached out to Steinberg to be a particular, like a developer, that they might have a way of being able to create the VST preset or the VST sound file. But you could reach out to Steinberg about that. And I think if you don't see like a web address, but you know, if you have, you know, like when we go to different collections that will all be tagged. So if, let's say I go to my VST instruments and I want Retrologue here. And as, you know, if I wanted to come over here and let's say I just changed this. And this is now my preset that I've made. So I will come over here and save the preset. So we'll just call it so all of my presets can show up you know, directly. So if we go to our MediaBay, let's go home and go to user presets, to VST instruments. And then we could just have our March 23rd preset. So if I just drag and drop that over, that will have our preset. But I think, you know, if you want it to be like part of the, you know, like the VST instrument, you know, there's kind of like the Hallian Partners program that, you know, so like with some of the recent libraries where that will show up as a VST sound file, and that may involve some development information that you could get from Steinberg. So if you want it all as one file, but you could just save your individual patches. But if you're looking to sell them, that would be a great way to do it on kind of the, you know, the VST kind of, you know, platform from the Steinberg website, which is what a lot of people are doing. Okay, so we see the most important thing, is there a club Nuendo? So, you know, we answer Nuendo questions here and Wavelab questions, occasional Dorco questions. So, but I think that they're trying to get someone to do, you know, I'm pretty taken with, I've offered to do some of the Nuendo Hangouts, but, you know, I think that they're looking to have someone else do it. But, you know, but you could definitely ask Nuendo questions here. All right, so we have just a comment. Hi, Greg and fellow Cubase users. Just wanted to thank you for the regular Hangouts. Personally, being a silent viewer otherwise, greetings from Berlin. Thanks for making a comment. We're glad to have you on the Hangout. Whether you are silent or not, as long as you're enjoying it. But if you're silent, you have to hit the like button. That's all I ask. So. Yeah, so we're just seeing some more discussion about subscription models and, you know, Cubase being expensive. But yeah, I mean, you could always start off with Cubase Elements and then upgrade to Cubase Artist and then upgrade to Cubase Pro. So you could kind of get a lot of, you could, you know, start off with a small budget and kind of, you know, expand your capabilities as your knowledge and budget allows. So. And also for people starting off with their students, there's aggressive educational pricing. Something that I didn't have when I got my Cubase when I was in college. So I made sure that they implemented. All right, so we see Alexander Johnson's. This is his first time in the live stream. Welcome. Hope to see you on future live streams as well. Okay, so I just see a question. Are we allowed to post links to external eShops, non-Steinberg? I think that only if you're a moderator can you post a link to a particular in the chat field, but you could probably just mention it. So if you're like, okay, it's Sweetwater or Tomon or, but be aware that you may post a link to a dealer that can't sell to a particular territory. So, if, like in the United States, our dealers can't sell to Mexico or Canada or to Europe or Japan. And there's other kind of geographical restrictions as part of dealer agreements and stuff. So, okay, just okay, I just see a question from Ace. Greg, is it possible to add articulations to hi-hats in Groove Agent or how? So a lot of times you can add articulations, but I don't know any drum library that actually does articulations because you're often just doing different velocities. So when you're kind of, to get between different drums, it's not so much key switches. But most drums will be kind of based on velocities. And if we wanted to go to, different hi-hats, sometimes those are often the controller will just send different MIDI messages. So a lot of times it's going to be based on, the note that's being transmitted, especially from an electronic drum kit. And it could be a bit different than doing something like an orchestra, simulate kind of orchestral instruments for what composers would generally be doing. So most of the drums are kind of already set up for velocity basis for being able to switch and MIDI note messages. So there may not be as many articulations like for hi-hats, but the hi-hats could just respond. I know some MIDI controllers will allow you to have just a MIDI CC, I forgot what MIDI CC message, like CC4 or something that could go between like the different stages of the hi-hat opening. But that's just a basic MIDI CC message that's just only triggered from the particular controller that you're using, like a Roland or a Yamaha kit. Okay, Carlton Joseph asks, hi Greg, London in-house. What's your thoughts on the dongle not being used anymore in the future? If that's true, thanks, keep up your great works. Peace. I like someone who's gone through, probably 10 different studio computers in the last 20 years. I kind of like having the e-licenser because when I have to reconfigure my next computer, it's a breeze. I just install the software and all the licenses are stored. I realize that for some people who are doing a lot of portable solutions, to have to move their laptop, and I do that as well. I've never had an issue, and I've used the same USB e-licenser in my studio and for my travel work rig for about 20 years each, and haven't had any issues. I never lost one. I think I even put it in the washing machine once and it worked, but don't do it. When I think if you go through a lot of different system configurations and I still have plugins that I have licenses to that I never got reauthorizations for. So, that kind of shies me away from systems where I can't have it on a licenser, like an e-licenser type of device. So I kind of like having that particular piece of hardware that's running it, but But we just, I don't really make the decisions, and we want to come up with something that makes sense for all of the users in different scenarios. So that's what they're working on now. Okay. Okay, so just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Great quote from Jazz Dude. There's no 2-minute solution to music theory. Hey Greg, are there any pieces of hardware that can allow for better guitar DI? I run straight into built-in mic preamp on my Focusrite 18i20, but I'm not achieving the best DI signal. Thanks. A lot of times I know in the Steinberg interfaces that there is a switch on the interface because it is a different impedance. So, the mic, your guitar level and a microphone level are very different. So, if you have the ability, I know that the Steinberg interfaces can have a little switch for one of the inputs in the front, and that's a high Z input, and that has the impedance matched directly for guitar bass. So I run my bass directly into a high Z input and don't have any problems. And I get, what I think is good. I don't have any issues with the sound quality of that. But, so if your interface has something like that, whether it's a hardware switch or maybe a software switch that can alter the impedance of that, but plugging your guitar straight into like a mic input, that may not be most ideal. So see if you have a high Z input switch. And if you do, turn that on, and that will kind of match the impedance on the interface for what they're expecting to come out of your guitar or electric bass. Okay. Let's clear my throat. All right. So we have a question. Is there a way to write polyrhythms on one track, i.e. triplets against duplets, or I guess tuplets on a piano track? Thank you. So let's go ahead. Yeah, so you could always record it in, no problem. But let's say if I wanted to take, all right, so I'll just kind of start this. Let me just turn on my snap here. Okay, so I'll just put this into quickly into step entry mode. So, you could play it in, obviously your triplets would be triplets, but I'll just come here and say, okay, I want to do triplets and activate step mode. And let me just, sorry about that. Let me undo. Okay, so I'll just put in triplets here. Okay, so now we have that as eighth note triplets, and let's say if I want to put in quarter notes, and let's put in, dotted eighths. Oh, sorry, I had it configured from. Sorry about that. Just find a spot. I had to hit a note that triggered a remote control that I'd set up from previous Hangout. So now we'll have dotted eighths. So, and let's put in, half notes or whole notes. So you could just kind of, put in kind of any rhythmic value that you want to have kind of more, polyrhythms going on. So if you want to do, quintuplets versus septuplets as well, no problems. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, is there a way via the logical editor to delete any notes under a certain MIDI CC value? For example, deleting notes under velocity 20 value. Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's say I wanted a bunch of notes. So I have a bunch of notes here. All right, and so I wanted to delete let's say notes that have a velocity lower than 30. So I'll go to my logical editor. Go to the right menu. We'll say we want to delete notes where value 2 is less than 30. So, and now just come right there, and that will just delete those particular notes. So come here, and every note that had a velocity less than 30, and I think you might even be able to lose this. So say velocity is less than 30, delete. So you could just say value 2 is less than 40. And function delete, boom. And that's all you have to do. And technically, velocity is a part of the MIDI note message and not a CC, but that'll do the trick for you. All right, so we have Fred Robinson checking in from Prague. Always wanted to go there. All right, so we have a click pattern is today's revelation for Millard Brown. That's good. All right, so we see James mentioning, he asked a question about DSP accelerators. He says, thanks. Yeah, I had one of the old M-Audio Transit USBs when USB was just starting to be an option. So yeah, I remember that. Okay, so just see love Cubase, but find a workflow painfully exhausting compared to other DAWs and the VariAudio hit points free warp broken. Is the VariAudio hit points free warp broken in Cubase 10? I cannot find a single tutorial that is appropriate. All I want to do is be able to adjust a beat that is out in, say, a drum loop. All right, so we'll show you how to do this. So it's probably not a VariAudio type of function, but let's go ahead and just take a drum loop here. Okay, so if I wanted to just adjust a single beat, I would go to the sample editor and just go to audio warp and enable free warp. And what you could do is just come here. So I usually put like a marker at the beginning and at the end, and then you could just adjust, you know, your beat. So if you wanted this particular note to be like this hit to be right on the grid, so let's say we listen to it. So if I wanted that, let's say this little hi-hat to be exactly on the grid, I would just kind of, let's say, keep that one there, keep that there, and then we could just adjust that to go directly on the grid. So at that point, you could just kind of come right over here and just adjust, you know. So if you put kind of like an anchor point behind and after, you could just adjust that point just to move like a particular note earlier or later and see it on a grid. Okay, we have a question from Sub403. Greg, is there a way to rename my MIDI logical presets? Thanks. So if you wanted to just come over here, so let's say if I created a logical, so I have, let me just take a look at a MIDI part. So I'll just go to my logical editor. And as we come here, so let's say, all right, so I will save this as, so I'll call this sub 403. Okay. All right, so say if I wanted to change the name, so it might not update, but you might be able to just to rename. So you could see with this, and then you could go in and delete that particular one, but you could load it up and just name it a different one and go into your logical editor presets and your preferences and just delete the one that you wanted to. Okay, so we see from Taylor, the UR824 has no MIDI input. If I connect my MIDI keyboard via USB, can I record VST instruments and audio at the same time? So yeah, you definitely can. So it's, even if it has a MIDI input, you know, it's the MIDI data and audio could be recorded simultaneously. So it could come in from different sources. All right. Right, and further comment from Alexander Johnson about the audio warp. Says a lot of tutorials say do this and then this will happen, and it just doesn't translate, look the same, or happen. Takes seconds in other DAWs. So I think it's pretty quick once you do it inside of Cubase, but let me know if that is doing what you want. Okay, I just see, hi Greg, what's the best way to tap and set the tempo? I end up using my phone instead of Cubase because I don't see that feature. All right, so if you want it to come up with the tempo, you go to project, and you can do it from two different areas. So one is just the beat calculator. So you'll see tap tempo, and then you could just hit the space bar. All right, so say, okay, 111.5, and then you could say insert at tempo track start. And we see I'm at 100 beats a minute. I'll say at the tempo track start, and now my tempo has been applied. So once again, just go to beat calculator here, and you will see a tap tempo function. Okay, so I see from Fred, can an envelope be copied to another event easily? Workaround, replace current audio clip by dragging a new clip in from the pool plus shift. An envelope is kept. Is there a cleaner way? Cubase 11 Pro Mac. So generally, the envelope is on the event itself and it's not on the file. So I think it's going to be that's probably your cleanest way to do it, because you could think of it as being for an event. Now you could do it across multiple events simultaneously to get kind of the same fade in on multiple tracks. But I think, that's why it's not actually part of the event. It's not actually part of the file itself. All right, see, nice comment from Kent Keller. Greg, I got to say, these live streams have changed the way I think about Cubase. Interactive training is essential and was the missing component for my effective use of Cubase. Keep doing these. Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad it's been helpful. So that's why we want to do these things, to make sure that people are getting the most out of their Cubase that they already have. So if you learn a new feature in your Cubase just for attending, that, I feel great. And if someone has a revelation of the day, like Gareth had with the click patterns, there's so many little things that we could all. I learn new things with these live streams all the time. So, but I'm glad it's been helpful. Thank you for the note. So I just see, will be great to hear more about film scoring in Cubase. Obviously it's a great solution for that. But if you have any particular questions, let us know. I'll show a couple of things really quick, but if there's a particular, I want to do this or accomplish this, let me know. So I don't have to, be incredibly broad, but I'll show you a couple of things that may not be so obvious. All right, let's get this. Sorry, I have someone that's constantly tagging me on weird stuff on Facebook, so I'm going to untag myself. All right. So, one of the things that a lot of people miss is this concept and the transport of being able to use video file as edit mode. So if you have particular notes that you wanted to adjust, that as you move a note, that you could see the video update frame by frame just like that. So if you needed to enlarge parts, you could do that. So that's any time that you would move an event. So you could just see the exactly where that event starts or ends. So that, I think that's Florian, who brings us all of our wonderful instruments and sound sets. This is the Steinberg office. And something that a lot of people also miss, once you have the video inside, at this point, if you needed to say, I want it to go directly from this transition, and I want this to be measure 28, we could go to your time warp tool and just say measure 28 starts right here. And I need it to have 4 measures be exactly here. So what I could do is say, okay, there's measure 28. I need 1, 2, 3, let's say 8 measures or 6 measures. I can now just adjust the timeline, and that will set up kind of an even number of measures between 2 different positions in your project. So there's a couple of little film scoring tips that some people miss when they first start, but if you have particular questions, just let us know. I'd be happy to show that. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Hope all is well. Curious, I find that Cubase sounds better than other DAWs. People say it's all the same, but I absolutely hear a difference. Is there some special mojo you guys do with... So I think, and I've done tests like this where we're taking 2 different programs, and how... we set up tests before is to take 2 laptops with the same exact audio file, the same exact levels, the same panning laws. And we would take two laptops, hit play, and go to like an analog console, and you could just mute and unmute different tracks. And that was like really interesting. And I remember being, in a room with, a bunch of Grammy winning engineers in Nashville when we did it. And one of the I remember Gary Pachoza, who's an incredible engineer, and I think after we did this, he's like, oh, I always thought it was me that was way better than everyone else. But, I realized that how much the Cubase helps with this. So, I've heard the difference. I'm not saying it's like scientific, but I remember showing this in New York at Right Track Studios when it was open, and we're in Frank Filipetti's room, and we had and at this point we did Nuendo and another DAW, and and we did it for like the Nuendo product manager at the time, and it was Abing, and it was like. And he was kind of shocked at the difference between between Nuendo, which shares the same engine as Cubase, and the other program. And, and Frank just turned and he looked at the Nuendo project manager. He's like, why is that? And he's like, we don't do anything special, but we work really hard not to affect the integrity of the audio signal. So that's why delay compensation is critical. And there's a zillion little things where you could kind of compromise the sound quality, and they're very careful not to do that. So I think that makes a big difference in the sound. So, but there's no special mojo juice that they add, but they work really hard not to mess it up. Okay. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, any updates regarding USB dongle replacement with software? So I think that this will be months off, but they wanted to announce it so that the market could be prepared for it. They have started, I think last Friday during our live stream, they actually released an announcement, kind of an update with some more information. I think that we'll see more information come out during the development cycle of this process to keep users informed. But I think everything is fine for months at this point. What from the announcements is what I know. So. right. All right, so we have lots of people from Texas in the live stream today. That's great. Miss going down there. All right, so question, when you send different instruments to the same reverb, how do you batch export each stem with the reverb without hearing other instruments in each stem? All right, so that's a great question. So let me just jump back. So let's say we'll go back to our little classical piece. It's my friend John Miller, my college friend. He's a now accomplished solo bassist and plays in a symphony in Sarasota, Florida. So when we go to do our export audio mixdown, you have the option now to, when we do a multiple export, it used to be prior to version 11 that all of the effects would kind of be summed together here. But we could now, when we do a channel batch export, we could have the effects and we could include the sends, and that will be the sends only on the piano tracks, only on the bass tracks, isolated from the other tracks. So that was a big deal with Cubase 11. So I could have, you know, those particular tracks printed with their effects only, and not the effects of the other tracks being bled while you make stems here. So when you go to the batch export, you could just come right over here and under effects, choose groups and sends and channel strip. And then that will apply just the sends for that particular channel when doing the batch export. Okay, so I just see maybe you could do a whole hangout on keyboard shortcuts in April. So that's a good suggestion, Tim. Let me know if there's like particular keyboard shortcuts that you'd like to know. Okay, so I just see a comment from Tony. Still pretty new to Cubase and mixing engineering in general. I mixed something last night and it put me in my place when I heard it in a truck this morning. So yeah, that's always kind of the moment of truth, listening to it in your car where you're kind of listening to music and you're very used to it. And a lot of times, you know, when stuff is, you know, it's, you know, it could be two things. Not only like, you know, as you learn to mix better and listen more critically, but you know, it's also, you know, your room could be fighting you too. So I go into a lot of people's rooms and there's no treatment. They don't have anything kind of sucking up the bass in the corner. I kind of got lucky with my room. Like I have like a string bass, like with a case on it. I keep it just so my son doesn't get too creative. And that kind of serves as a big bass trap in one corner where a lot of low end frequencies were kind of populating before. But yeah, so, you know, and I could tell you that everyone that's mixed, you know, every incredible mixer that's available now has had that same experience. They just did it before you. So just keep doing it. Don't be discouraged. Try to figure out what's wrong and just solve the problem. Solve one problem at a time and you'll get there. So. All right, so we see from DB Music Productions, Viva Club Cubase live streams. Just when I feel like I make great use of Cubase, I get to attend a live session of this and realize how little I know. Thanks for the unbelievable service. So we're glad it's helpful. So I usually learn something new in every Hangout, and I had one composer tell me once, he's like, Greg, you're the only one who doesn't run Cubase for yourself. And you're trying to think of how other people are working Cubase. So, this way it's really easy to like, I do this and, it worked for me once and I'm going to do it for 10, 20 years because, I did it once, it solved a problem. This is how I developed a workflow. So sometimes workflows evolve and there's new enhancements that could, make workflows better. And because you're still doing your same workflow, you may not have realized that 2 versions ago that there was, a little tweak that can make things better for you. So that's why we do these things, because we realize that Cubase is an incredibly powerful and deep program, and we want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. I saw. All right, we see that Gareth is made to hang out. I'll catch up to where he makes his entrance. All right. All right, so I may have lost some questions. I apologize for that. Okay, so I'll just kind of start where my chat field is starting. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. So we'll try to get through them as quickly as we can. Okay, so from Tariq, or Tarek, hi Greg, my MIDI stacked recording does not behave like audio. I still can hear the MIDI notes I played during the first cycles of recording I did with audio recording. Everything is fine. Any idea? So some of the behavior can change depending for MIDI if you've recorded in cycle mode. And I'll kind of see if I get a clarification on like the reasoning for this, why there's a distinction to start with. But I'll just take a look here. So when you go to different MIDI recording modes, okay, so let's say I'll just put this into, okay, so I'll just record, just adjust the volume here so you guys could hear it probably a little better. Okay, so I'll just put this into, so there's different MIDI recording modes. So if you do cycle recording, and I realize that this, and if you put it on stacked here, so let's say if I just kind of put this into cycle recording, I'll just play low notes and go up higher. I don't hear the previous note. So now when we play back, you'll hear just only like the last take, but they'll all be kind of there as different lanes. But so, you could just kind of come over here and just, if you do it in cycle record, you could do it as stacked. You could choose to create new parts. But it will kind of keep playing back the previous parts. Let's go ahead and just try that really quick. So say I'll just do so I'll just put it not into cycle record, and we'll choose our MIDI recording mode here to new parts. And okay, and I will go ahead and record again. All right, and then I accidentally turned auto quantize on. Sorry. Let me just try that again. I'll start over. So I'll start with low notes. Okay, and then record again. So both notes are there. They'll show up as parts that are like underneath. So, but you know, so they're gonna just kind of show up there. But you know, what you could do is, you know, and I know this probably a little bit of a hassle, but you could just choose to mute the event and then record the other part over top. But I'll see if I could maybe get an explanation as to why you could mute the parts when in cycle mode, but not in regular record mode. With audio, it's different because the audio, there's going to be one audio file playing on a track at a time. But MIDI, you could layer or choose not to. So sorry I lost some questions in between. Apologize for that. All right. All right, great to see Sable Winters on a Hangout. All right, so we have Gareth on a Hangout, so great to see. All right, so I just see a question, audio to MIDI. Sorry, my chat field just jumped again. Okay, so just see a question, audio to MIDI. So if you wanted to, you know, take an audio part, so let me just grab one from over here, say something more melodic.
Remember me.
Okay, so I can now just double click on this. Let me just find something maybe. Sorry about that. Let me just adjust our volume here. So let's say we have
Of my life.
So if I wanted to turn that into MIDI, I could just go, and this works for monophonic material, but I could go to VariAudio. It will do our quick analysis of this, and under functions, we could extract MIDI. And you could just now turn that directly into MIDI right there within the edit window. So that's how you could do it. But it's intended for monophonic, like audio that's one voice, not chords. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And if you haven't given a like, if you've learned something new, make sure you give a like. That allows us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, so just see VariAudio, I can't hear some tone if I change. So this could be two different aspects that could cause this. So let's say, Okay, so if we're in VariAudio and if you wanted to hear the tone, so it could be that, you know, a lot of people run into this where, okay, I'm expecting to hear the note as I do the editing. It could be that one that you may have to turn on the acoustic feedback, which is usually on by default. If that's not turned on right here, the little speaker, then you won't hear those changes. So make sure that you do that. And also the control room will get routed out, or the VariAudio will get routed out through the control room. So make sure in your audio connections that you have the control room mapped here. So we could go directly to, like this is where my speakers are configured as opposed to just my stereo outputs. Okay, so we have a question from Sub403. Greg, how would I create a MIDI logical preset to increase the velocity of every downbeat by set amount? I'm loving the logical editor these days as I'm finally getting a grip on the power they hold. Yeah, once you kind of get into the logical editor, you kind of crossed into like the power user realm, but it's a wonderful tool. And once you start building up your presets, it's a great thing to do. So let's say I have, you know, drums here. And let's just say I have quarter notes. Okay, and I only want the drums on like beat 1 to be louder. So let's say I have all these kicks here and I just want beat 1 to be louder. Okay. So I will come to my MIDI menu. Let's go to our logical editor. And we want to say, we're going to take transform. Type is equal to notes. And then we're going to set our, let's see, there's just a range that we could set. Okay, so we're going to say context variable, and we'll say inside range, and then we're going to choose, I think we could do it from here. I thought it was there. Let me just position. I'm sorry. I think this will do it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of graphically select like the downbeat here. Okay, so this is basically like, we'll say inside bar range. And I'm just going to select kind of like around beat 1, but not 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to say we're going to take value 2, and I wanted to add 40. And we'll apply this. So now if I did this right, right. All so that. Okay, so there we could select only notes on the downbeat, but let's say okay, so when I do this, we could say, all right, so let's say value 2, and let me try adding again, or else I'll set it to maybe a fixed value of 120. And so we'll look at just beat 1 here. So what this is doing, we say type is equal to notes. We're going to choose a function transform. Type is equal to notes. And then position, you could choose inside bar range. And from within here, you could say, I want it to be only around beat 1 or beat 2 or beat 3. And you could add more of these Boolean conditions. And then at this point, we could say, okay, we're going to do type is equal to that, and we're going to set our velocity value to 120 for notes on the downbeat. So that's how you could take, just the downbeats and make those more prominent in MIDI using the logical editor. All right, so I just see, and this may be a question I missed in when I lost some of the chats, but maybe it's from Taylor about taking notes and randomizing them. So if I wanted to randomize the pitch, let's say I have a bunch of notes here, and I didn't see the original question, so I apologize. But if you wanted to randomize the pitch of these notes, we could do this in a logical editor too. So let's come over here and I'll say let's transform, and we'll say our notes, and we want to take value 2 or value 1, which will be our MIDI pitch, the note. And here we could set to random values between, let's say, F0 and F1. Or you could also, once you're here, just play a particular MIDI note for the values. So now I'll come over here and hit apply, and that will take all of those notes and set it to random values between those two pitches that I played. So if you want to do like different atonal aspects or just coming up with like a 12 tone, you could do stuff like that as well. So it would take everything that was on that particular line, and we could just come again to the logical editor and let's apply that. So between the two notes, I just randomly play it on my controller keyboard, and then you could just randomize pitches or randomize velocity. So any number of different functions there. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussions. All right, so we have someone checking in from Thailand. Welcome to the Hangout. All right. All right, just reading through, so lots of great discussion. All right, so we have someone checking in from Paraguay. To see comment from Jazz Dude, Cubase was originally developed by German hippies, Charlie and Manfred. I think Manfred was the keyboard player and Charlie was the engineer of the band. So, and they saw this MIDI threat to their studio lives. So Charlie figured out how to write some code. Okay, reading through. More comments. Okay, says I have Cubase 10 and Isotope Music Studio 3. Is there an easy way to drop a complete song, 2 or 3 half notes, so I can use it as karaoke for my my bass alt voice newbie here? So if you have a song, yeah, there's a number of different ways to just transpose. So let's say if I wanted to come. I'll just do kind of like a 2-track mix here. So let's say if I'm playing this song and I just wanted to transpose in real time, I could select it. We'll see from the info line, transpose. So I want to go up. So just right here in the transpose field, once you select the event, then you can find the right key. So that's how you could just transpose a track really easily. So you don't need any third-party tools. You could just do it directly inside the Cubase right there. So. I see that Pablo is back from dinner, probably already a half hour ago. All right, trying to catch up. So I just see, hello, dear Greg. When are we going to be able to move our tracks and delete them straight from the mixing console? It really is weird that Cubase is the only DAW that doesn't allow this. Thank you. So I know that the developers are aware of it. So hopefully they're working on solutions. I know that they are, I mentioned this to them many times, and I'm sure that it'll be implemented when it gets implemented. I don't know. I'm not really privy to those discussions, but I'll kind of reiterate it again. But I know that it's kind of well known within the product planning and development circles. So at Steinberg. All right, we see the Taylor's now collecting tardy slips, so that'll be good. He could be our class monitor. So I just see a question from Ian Rushmore. Good to see you on Hangout. Do you know if the filters in a pre-section of the mixer are linear phase or natural minimal phase? I think that they're natural minimal phase, because usually if it's linear phase, it would give you an option to kind of turn on and off the linear phase. So I would say that they're going to be minimal phase, but I'm not absolutely positive, but that would be my inclination. So. But if you did want linear phase, you could always do it inside of frequency. Okay, so just see a question. Greg, still pretty new to Cubase. So welcome to Cubase, and we're glad you're running it. How do I edit a small section in a track? Example, add an echo to a small part in a vocal. All right, so let's take a look how we could do that. There's a couple different ways. You could always automate a plugin. So if I wanted to come here, we could show you just a quick way of doing this. So let's just move my time over here. Okay, so let's say I wanted to just come over here to, let's say, my vocal track, and I'll make sure this isn't so loud. Okay. So let's say right where you're saying the word you. The easiest way to do this is just to, like with the range tool, just select the range, go to your audio, and you could just go to, like, you know, go to plugins and just choose, okay, just wanted to add a delay. So you can say just wanted a mono delay, and I want this to be, you know, so now it's already kind of, we'll listen to it. And we could add different tail sizes if we wanted to as well. So you could just kind of come right over here and so you could do that. Now, some people will just add you could always remove this, which is kind of unique. So if I want to go back to the original, I could always just add let's say if I go to ascend, and so here I have just a little bit of a delay send already. So let's say if I come here. All right, so let me just come over here, and if I wanted more delay on that, I will just kind of come to the particular channel. Let's automate it and go to descend. So it's a much shorter delay, but you could now just come over here and also just automate. So either way, you could automate or just simply just, you know, select a file and just go to audio process and just put the plugin on right like that, and that will just embed it in a file, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Miller to Brown. Greg, is there a MIDI or other remote control command to switch between A and B settings on a VST instrument? So I think I know like plugins will often have like an A-B setting. So let's say if I wanted to come here, you know, you could just, I think if we, we could have like an A and B settings here. So if we wanted to switch to a B setting and just be able to kind of toggle back and forth, we could do that, and that's automatable. But let's try it within a instrument. Yeah, so you could just come here and switch to A or B settings. So let's say I wanted to. Okay, so now, so let's say I have that and I want to switch to B setting. And let's go back to A, switch to A setting. And all right. So we got those two different sounds. So I think if we come here to generic remote, so let's say our note on message, I'll capture this. Sorry for hitting. Sorry. All right, so all right, I already have that MIDI note selected. Sorry. Okay, so I have that MIDI note selected for something already, but let's come over here. So we have that set for start, but I think if we go to command, let me just see if I can find it in my key commands here quickly. See if it's a... Yeah, it doesn't look like the switch AB is set from a keyboard shortcut. So, but you could do it within the, by just going to this little drop down menu. So. Okay, let's read through some more comments. Okay, so a question from Ian Rushmore. Can you demonstrate the auto crossfade function, please? Having jumped from SX2 to 10, then 11, there's so much that is new to me. All right, so let's say if I wanted to take... I'll just do kind of a nasty edit here. So let's say I'll just turn off zero crossing on this track and I'll do just a cut. All right, and I'll... Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we could hear this. I got no control. All right, and let me see if I could just All right, so let's say if I just do a little overlap. All right, let me see if I can do it maybe on the bass part. It might be a little more obvious. Let me see if I can make the edit more obvious here. Okay, so if you wanted the, you know, like for the on playback for slight fade, let me just see if I can just do a really bad edit. All right. Well, since I don't want to spend too much time trying to do a bad edit to get the point across, but you know, so as you do this, you could, you know, if you wanted to crossfade, you could hit the X key and that will do the crossfade between two different sections. But you could also just activate auto fades here. And what this will do on playback, and you could just choose it to auto fade and auto crossfade. So what this will do on playback is actually just add a little fade out or fade in or crossfade between those two sections without having to manually write the crossfade in. You don't see it visually, you don't edit it, but it'll just do it based on like, you know, 10 milliseconds. So you could hear kind of like a little bit of a crossfade there. Let's see if we just turn this off. If we get kind of a nasty edit. All right, so you could hear kind of that. They'll make it a little louder. So, and let's see if I even make it like here. That should be a pretty nasty edit. So now that if I just activate the auto fade settings for that track, it'll just kind of do a fade in and fade out or crossfade when the new audio is introduced, kind of smooth that out. But you can still do the manual crossfades, but I think even in SX2 it added the auto fade settings were in that version there. So I just see a question. Hi, Greg. Can we please get a better way to work with multi-mono in Cubase? We really need to work with multi-mono plugins, just like Pro Tools. Can you let Steinberg know this? Thank you. So I'll pass it on. It's another issue that they, you know, are aware of. So, but I'll pass it along again. So, but you could do some stuff, you know, with, doing routing into mixers, but I'll mention it again. All right. So I see Garrett just thanking me for the bass line for a song I did for him yesterday. So that was, I like that song a lot. I hope it worked out well for the bass line. Okay, question from Greg McCarty. I think he was maybe even on our first live stream that we did. Good to see you on the Hangout or the live stream. I'm slowly getting better with Groove Agent. I have 4 and SE5. Why is my kick drum distorting when load a pattern? So I haven't really come across, if you could, Greg, let me know which pattern and maybe which kit you're loading up. So sometimes patterns could be created for one particular kit and you could use them interchangeably, but it, could cause problems if you're doing like a really heavy hip hop thing and maybe it's kind of a rock kit that's maybe distorted, but the pattern is something else and maybe it's pushing the velocities. But if there's a particular pattern, you could let me know. I'd be happy to kind of fire it up and check it out. All right, so just for people who don't know, I see some discussion of like multi-mono support. So, if you wanted to have, let's say, on a stereo track, I'll just jump back to one of our projects. If you wanted to apply different compression on the left and different compression on the right channels for a particular project, I'll just kind of pop over here. Let's go to, I had it open still. Okay. So if you needed to do this, I know this is kind of a workaround, but it will still allow you to work. You could go to inserts here. So say it's on a stereo track and I'll just put two compressors. So if you needed to compress the left and right channels independently, so let's say I'll go ahead and open up this particular, let me just move this plugin over here. Okay, so if you go to the routing, we could choose to, sorry about that. Let me just make this mono and let's make this one mono. So, and I could choose kind of different routing for each of these. So now I could have one compressor on the left channel and a different compression setting on the right. So I know it's not as elegant a solution, but you can have those different changes. So if you go to your inserts, go to routing, and then just click on mono, that you could do kind of different mono sources just like that as well. So okay, so we have a question. How can I get the artist to hear the auto-tune live in the booth while recording? So, generally that might not be such a great idea because it could impose latency, additional latency. So I think if you use the, was it the auto-tune Evo or kind of the smaller one, that the latency can be taken care of that. But you want to just, you could put it into a couple of different ways. So if you're tracking your vocal, we can go to, let's say we have a mono track for our vocal. If you wanted to burn it in permanently, you go to the mix console and let's say for this mono track, you could just come over here and just say, whatever input it is, and you could put the plug-in directly on the channel. So if you say, okay, I want my pitch correct plug-in and we're in a key of, C major, we could just have that burned into the effect and you'd hear that in real time. If you place it on the channel as an insert, not on the input channel, but on the actual audio track, they will be able to monitor with the pitch, with the auto-tune or pitch correction plugin in real time, but it's not embedded. And if you're not hearing those particular effects, it could be that you have the constrained delay compensation on, which may bypass it, or the fact that your audio interface, if you go to studio setup, is set to direct monitoring. Now, if your interface is set to direct monitoring, the signal is going directly from the input to the output and it's bypassing all the software engine. So then that gives you the direct monitoring. So if direct monitoring is checked, or if it's checked in the audio interface for the system, at that point, you won't be able to hear it. So those are a couple things to check. I just see from Chase, oh my God, the time warp thing, I needed that fix. I needed that in uni. I just adjusted my composition to fit, laughing out loud. Not even my mentor taught me that. So you can teach Ken a new trick, Chase. All right. Okay, so it's just seeing some of the same questions repeated a couple times. All right. Okay, so a question from Luke Johnson. Is it possible to have different offset timings for different articulations? When using expression maps, track delay is fine for one part per track, but parts have different sample start points. Many thanks. So I don't think that this is part of the expression maps. So I don't think that you're going to be able to set like different timings for that. But what you could do is set up, if you wanted to, you could set up a logical editor preset. So if you find that every time you use this articulation that the sample needs to start like with this articulation, this needs to start at a particular time. So let's see if we could, I know that you could take different notes. So I'll just add a quick instrument track here, and let's just say sorry about that. Okay, so I think that you could probably so what you might be able to do is to say, okay, let's say type. So you can say type is equal to note, value 1, the pitch, let's say if it's, C0 or C-1, whatever the articulation is, that you could change the position and subtract, and you could switch this by milliseconds or PPQ or by samples or frames. So you could say, every... so you could set up a whole different articulation. Like you might be able to, you could try this. So you could say like, every C-1 note triggers this. Every E minus 2 note triggers it this much earlier, this much later. And you could adjust the positions, and you could create these as presets and run it as a macro for a particular instrument. So I think once you set that up once, that, you know, if you have to do that a lot, that might do the trick. So I would give that a try, because you could do individual notes to different articulations, and you could say, this is, you know, this east-west library or whatever it is, and, you know, run a macro that is just a series of these particular offsets for particular notes. So you could probably try that. I know it's involved to set it up, but it's probably also involved to tweak every single part individually as well. All right, so I see from Michael Teams, I miss seeing me at Spunky's. Yeah, I miss going down and see Spunk too. Hopefully we'll be able to do in-person demos as well as our online live streams. All right. Okay, just go over here. My chat field jumped on me again, sorry. All right, so we see Daniel from Belgium checking in. All right, so we see from Skyrise, Greg, can you high-five me through the screen? So consider it done. All right. Okay, so Sable, you see that Taylor is waiting to get up to speed on his Cubase 11. We see that Sable wants everyone to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, so we see a question, better way to correct tempo detection inaccuracies, source whole song. I am cutting that song some bars before deviation, select remaining part and reapply detect until next deviation. Better way, thanks. So, you know, if you're doing the tempo detection, you know, and if you know, if it doesn't catch something, so we'll come over to the project menu. We talked this a little earlier. I know that I'm probably answering this much later. But again, it's going to put you into like the time warp tool by default. So just when you have this checked here, you know, if you see like a little bump like here, what it's going to do is we could say, okay, it didn't probably interpret this measure correctly. So at that point, I would just say, okay, we're going to move this to here and move this part. And then it recalculates kind of the tempo based on that. So you don't have to cut it up and then kind of do individual parts. But right after, before you close this window, just kind of go through and kind of review the changes. And then you could kind of tweak the bar line with the time warp tool. And that way, you know, you could get, you know, it kind of aligned if it was off a little bit here or there. Okay, now according to Michael Teams, Sable and Gareth are famous. That's great. I'm glad I get to know all these famous people. All right, great to see JVI on the Hangout. And don't forget, everyone, next Tuesday will be the last live stream of the month. So we'll do a 2-hour session and do a 2-hour Zoom meetup. So if you guys want to meet each other in person, it's always a thrill for me to getting to meet everyone. Okay, so we see JVI just says, I just keep learning in these Hangouts. Can we all hit the like button, please? So I will go ahead and agree with JVI. And just saying some discussion about like the, about putting the echo on a part, make sure that when you do the offline processing, so, if you wanted to just do just a little section that they abruptly get cut off, just come over here and, I think I mentioned it before, but just in case. So let's say if we just wanted to put a delay just on that particular part. Sorry, get my mouse working right. You could just add if you just come right over here, you could add a tail in milliseconds, and you could also extend the process range time in milliseconds. So just make sure you do those settings, and then the effect won't abruptly get cut off, and you don't have to copy it to a separate track unless you want to. Okay, hey Greg, I have a question. Is there a way to drag a sample from Cubase onto the desktop, or a quick way to find arrangement view samples and then drag them out? All right, so let me just minimize a bunch of windows here. I haven't tried this in a long time. Yep, so it looks like you could just kind of, so that will just kind of drag the part out. And you could always just export out to the desktop as well. All right, so I see Jan is looking at all-time high for the like button so early this evening, so that's a good sign. I hope people are learning stuff. Okay, so we have a question. Not sure if I missed it or not. Wondering about my question about time signature track not moving with all the other tracks. Okay, so let's say if I have, just do a new project here quickly. All right, so I'll add a tempo track. All right, let's add a time signature track. Okay, so let's say I'll come here. Let's say I've okay, so I have tempo and I have, let's just throw in a couple of drum loops and let's say a MIDI part. All right, and I'll just take it off of. Okay, so now I have my events, and let's say, okay, so time signature track not moving with all the other tracks. So it could be that you need to do, all right, so let's say if we do if I just grab events here, so let's say if I move that, those will kind of stay the same. But I think if we grab like a range selection tool, and if we hold down Control plus Shift, and we could do kind of a global selection, that now we could come over here and just duplicate. So you try doing just a global selection, because think of it as almost two layers that we have kind of notes in the audio, and then kind of a maybe like a foundational layer as being like our tempo track and our signature track. So hold down, switch to the range selection tool and hold down Control or Command plus Shift. And now I could just kind of take this whole range So if I wanted to copy, I'll just do Control or Command C. And then, if I wanted to, or I just paste, I just cut it. But now I could, just move my cursor here and, be able to just hold down Alt or Option and copy and kind of have the same data. But try doing just selecting globally the range. So Control or Command plus Shift with the range tool, and that will select everything, including the signature and tempo tracks, as well as the audio and MIDI data. All right, so I know we had some questions that were sent in. Let's get to those. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful questions. If if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button again and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so we had a question: how to scroll in the mixer without using the arrow keys. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I wanted to now add, let's just add a plethora of tracks. All right, so we go to our mix console and we see that we have lots of channels, and a lot of people will just come over here and use the left-right arrow keys, which is cool, and that works. But another way to navigate is just to hover your mouse over the line here, and it could be anywhere, and just use your scroll wheel, and you could just navigate in your mix console just like that. So just kind of hover in that general area below the track names and use your mouse scroll wheel. And that's all you had to do. Okay. Okay, so just see a question. Thanks up front for your great hangouts. I have a question. Presets like in Retrologue have a default rating of 3 stars. Is there a way to delete all the ratings concurrently? Just from Henry in Austria. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Let's say we'll go to our MediaBay. And I wanted to go to, let's say, my factory content. And let's go to our VST3 presets. And all right, so we'll come over here to Retrologue. Let's see, they should be in here. All right, those are all just audio plugins. Okay, so let's say, all right, so if I have a whole bunch of factory presets for Retrologue, so you could select kind of all of your Retrologue presets here. So I think if we just hold down the Shift key, and then if you wanted to adjust a rating on all of them, you could just select them all. So you could start with 0 and then just kind of change the rating on multiply selected presets. So if you wanted to make your own ratings and not be stuck with the default 3 stars, you could just kill them all and then just kind of add your ratings as you see fit. So just hold down and select the bottom one. You know, you could select the top, go to the bottom, hold down the Shift key before clicking, and then adjust just by clicking with the mouse right there. Okay, so we got the next question from James already answered. All right, I'm just going to look up one quick. I know that it came in an email. Hang on just one second. I'm just going to find it. So I didn't copy the whole email over. So just wanted to make sure I got this one in. It's about creating a macro. Oh, sorry. Switched my keyboard. We just wanted to think this might be it. Okay, so it's so we have can you create a macro? It says I want to create a macro that will take a selected audio clip, add 2 bars of silence on either end and add a reverb, then reverse it. Is this possible? Okay. So let's go ahead and just try this. So all right, so what we want to do is to take an audio file, add 2 measures of silence at the beginning, at the end, and then be able to apply reverb and reverse it. So I think I got this kind of sorted out, but let's go ahead and take a look under key commands. So you can give this a try. So I did, okay, transport locators to selection. I did transport go to left locator, nudge -1 bar under transport nudge -1 bar. Transport set left locator to project cursor position. Go to right locator. Then we're going to add 1 bar at a time. And then we're going to set the right locator to project cursor position. And then we're going to process a reverb and then reverse it. So if I come here, let's say I'll just have, let's just listen to this. Okay, so I'm going to try the macro here. I'll just see if this works. I just have this selected. I'll just come right over here. All right, and now we'll listen to it. And I'll just try it with something like a drum loop that may be a little more obvious as we... All right, I'll just try it with a new project without tempo changes. Okay. Okay, so I'll just take this and let's go ahead and run the macro. So again, it'll just kind of come right there and process. And at this point, it'll just... So it doesn't add necessarily the 2 bars, you know, of silence. It will kind of do it in, but you could always just kind of render that file after and have kind of, you know, silence before and after. So if I wanted to just run that again, I'll just come here. So we get my... So again, I'll just take this and run that macro again. So now we play it. It's over silence, and then and if we wanted to undo, so you could do stuff like that for different sound design. So let me know if that works for you. All right, and I think we could go back to our live stream. Let's see how we're doing on time. We're doing well. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a couple new tips and tricks. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. I have a hard one to solve. If you make a percussion part, like 7 instruments in Groove Agent, but you make the groove with the beat designer, I have a touch screen, so ideal. How to split them and how to edit them if needed without doing it all over again. Okay, so, all right, so let me just get a Groove Agent part. Okay. Okay. So let's say we have a percussion part. So I'll just kind of do just a quick. Okay. So it says you make the groove with Beat Designer. All right. So I'll just make a Beat Designer groove here. All right. And let me just carry the names over so I'm not going blind. Okay. So let's say if I just wanted to come here and okay, so let's say I have that going on. So how to split them and edit them if needed without doing it all over again. So, if you wanted to just take, your beat agent. So let's say if I move my cursor back to 1, I could just come right over here and choose to, I'll insert the pattern at the cursor. So I have these different ones, and now what I'm able to do is, I'm not sure if I think this might do the trick for you, but if you want to dissolve part and separate pitches, it'll now just kind of come over here and you'll have each of the different sounds kind of broken down onto their own tracks. And then you could always kind of just, do, if you wanted to merge those together, you could do that as well. So let me know if that does the trick for you, but you could edit those and still just, see all of those different parts together if you wanted to see them within your editor. So you can see your kind of pattern just broken out directly there. So I just see question, can a chord track be made from a recorded instrument track? Like when I play my bass. So currently the chord track is only going to be derived from MIDI information. But you could do stuff like, okay, I want to take my bass, convert it to VariAudio, and be able to turn it into MIDI. But the VariAudio doesn't do polyphonic, so it's not going to do chords, and it's not going to be able to derive chords from a bass part, like a single note part. So currently, no. Okay, question in 10.5 Pro, how can I gradually change a MIDI track tempo from, let's say, 110 beats per minute to 125 over 4 bars from, let's say, bars 9 through 12? Okay, so let's say I have a tempo track. So I'll just add a tempo. All right, and I want to start at measure 9. So if we come here, we can see our tempo track, and I'll set this at 100 beats a minute. And I'm going to start it at measure 9. So I could just kind of put in a little node here. And we see this kind of this well hidden dialog box here where we could say step ramp automatic. So I could just say let's ramp, and let's say, okay, at measure 12, I want it to be at 125, and you could see kind of the values indicated. And now we'll just have our metronome just go up to 125. So I'll just turn it on, hit play. Sorry, I will turn off the MIDI insert there. So let me just mute all the tracks. So now if we want to just, so now we'll just see that gradual tempo change between the two different values up to 125 beats a minute. So just make sure that you go here, and then you could switch that from step to ramp. And automatic is that it'll keep this value so that, the next time I do a change, it would ramp. And if I apply other subsequent further tempo changes, it would just automatically keep the last value, or you could set it to step and it would step as well. So give that a try. All right, so we have from Sable, please demo multi-band envelope shaper. Okay. I'll just revert this quickly. Okay, so the envelope shaper is like an incredibly powerful plugin for kind of, getting dynamics off and back in drums that, you may have missed, and what people often try to do with lots of compressors. So let's say I will just load up just like a quick drum pattern. Okay, so what I want to do now is to apply like what an envelope shaper does. If you're not familiar with this, is I will just come over here. Let's go to the envelope shaper. And this is kind of a hidden gem. So if I go to the envelope shaper and I want the drums, like when everyone goes in every rock drummer goes in your studio and says, I want to sound like John Bonham, you're like, okay, play like him, that would help. But I could add more attack to the drums. And let's add more length and more release. Or I want it to be very tight, maybe like. So that's kind of what the envelope shaper can do. It's kind of like a huge anti-suck plugin for drums. Now, if we wanted to do this and split each of those bands across different frequencies, what we can do is have a multi-band envelope shaper. So let's say if I wanted to do that only on like the snare, but not affect the kick. So we could come over here and just kind of solo just like the snare frequencies. So now I could just take my snare and just really tweak just a snare. Without necessarily, if I wanted like the kick was too too much attack, or if I want to add more thump just in a kick. So that way you could have that type of control for the different, and a lot of people consider it as like a transient tool, but you could have that transient tool just on particular frequencies, which is incredibly helpful for a lot of situations. All right, see a kind word from Sub 403. Thank you again, Greg, for sharing your wisdom. Okay, so we have a question. How can you distinguish which sound packs I can download into Cubase 11 Pro? Which packs are included? So if we go to your Steinberg library manager, so let me just, we go to the download assistant. Okay. Let's see if this is the right password. Hate when it happens to me. All right, let's see. Here, I can show it in our way. Let me just get to. All right, so if you wanted to just go to, let's say, your Cubase 11 Pro, all of the licenses that you see here, all of the content, this is all included with your Cubase 11 license. So just so every one of those things that we see in the Cubase Pro 11 downloads, those are all included with your Cubase license. All right. Okay, I see that we're just about out of time, so I'm going to wrap up and we'll see everyone on Friday. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we will have another great hangout. Thanks for all the wonderful questions, and we'll see everyone Tuesday. Again, you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Thank you so much. Goodbye.